Hey everyone, Dan here from Fanatik Bike Co. Doug and I have popped over to our neighbor's Transition Bicycle Company. We're going to talk to a few of the guys here about their new Carbon Patrol, what that bike is really designed for, and how their SBG geometry, that speed balance geometry, sort of plays into this bike and really makes it what it is. Let's go check it out. So here I am in Transition's showroom with Sam Burkhart, the Transition product manager.
That's correct.
We're standing in front of your Carbon Patrol, which is actually the version 2 of the Carbon Patrol, because this is the SBG version. This was released in fall of this year, 2018. And one of the things that I kind of wanted to get into as an owner of an alloy patrol, and I have spent some time on the Carbon Patrol, is how you guys see this, where do you guys see this bike fitting into your lineup, and kind of what is it, its intended use? How does it play?
Yeah, so all of our bike models, we kind of consider all of them like multi-purpose, so we don't really put like a heavy emphasis on like enduro or trail or anything like that.
Up and down mountains.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so the Patrol is our longest travel 27.5 model. It can kind of compete against some of the longer travel, more bike park oriented models, but we've kept an emphasis on making sure it's still nimble and efficient feeling, so it's not too much bike for kind of all around use. Okay. But it does cater to the person that does a lot of shuttling, or they're maybe a little more focused on the down. This model in our line, really compared to the alloy, it is the weight savings and the ride feel difference of Carbon. It is a long bike, but I think especially when you look at the reach numbers, people tend to see that and feel like it's compared to what they're used to, that they might even want to size down, and really that's all played into part of the geometry. Okay. The stem length, the fork offset, even the head angle, and the seat tube angle, all that factors into the sizing. The bike rides a lot smaller than what the numbers kind of might suggest, and I think that's the same with the head angle, which is related to how the SBG setup handles. SBG is composed of several elements. It's not just one thing, and most people focus on the fork offset, but our speed balance geometry is a combination of fork offset, head angle, stem length, and seat tube angle. Okay. And you kind of need all of those in conjunction to get the actual ride feel and benefit that we have in our bikes. Okay. Just taking the shorter offset fork and applying it to a different bike doesn't create the same feel, and really, in our opinion, creates usually more of a negative than a positive. Okay. It's our first acronym. We previously only kind of joked around with those sorts of things. Yeah. But the name SBG comes from what you get in the handling. It is a speed balance geometry where you have a different feel at a higher speed than you do at a lower speed. Okay. I've seen a lot of people bring up the impact of the head angle and fork offset and high amount of trail, and talking about how that should have a lot of wheel flop. The thing that people often describe as wheel flop is really just wander, and that comes from not having enough pressure on the front wheel and basically fighting your body's position and the wheel being out in front of you. So
where your weight is in relation
to the axle, and exactly. Yeah, and so that way you're not getting wander, but it does still technically have a lot of flop, but that only happens in a sort of a broader steering scenario that you only encounter in slow speed, so like a switchback or something. So I don't know if you've noticed, but like a sharp uphill turn, you'll get to a point where you have to steer with the bars, you're going slow, and you kind of lock into a certain point, and the bike almost feels like it wants to keep going through that arc.
Into that turn.
And that is flop, but that's in a good way. So when you're in like more of a high-speed cornering scenario, you do encounter like less micro corrections. Okay. You're initiating your turn with leaning and doing the whole like counter steering thing that you're doing. Okay. But you don't need to do a lot of body correction and part of that is also the wheelbase, that you have a bigger footprint that you're kind of staying between. So it's a more relaxed feel on a high speed turn where you're not finding yourself constantly battling, am I getting enough traction front or rear? You can be a little bit more lazy, I guess you could say, about that, and still feel like you've got traction where you need it.
Next up, we're going to be meeting with Lars, the resident stuntman. Let's go find him and pick his brain on how these bikes sort of came to be. Okay, so when I first got on my alloy patrol, I did find, you know, in some particularly sharper corners, I would blow through the corners, so almost like understeering. Can you elaborate on how all these components of SPG might lead to that? And I should say that this kind of decreased as I learned how to ride the bike a little differently.
Right, yeah, so the differences in cornering between a standard GO bike and one of the SPG bikes is that the SPG bikes are going to encourage you to lean more when you're turning. And once you kind of like get accustomed to that, to initiating directional changes by carving, you know, opposed to steering, that's I think that's going to become a bit more normal. Sure. You know, and that, you know, that promotes, I kind of feel that promotes a bit better form.
Absolutely.
And once you know, some people find that it takes a bit of time to get accustomed to, and some just kind of do it right away. But and whether that's actually a negative or not, I guess is up to everybody's interpretation. But
yeah, it was just something that I encountered at the beginning, and I like how you describe it as carving a little more so than what you would typically consider cornering. At least I guess what I used to.
Yeah, totally.
It definitely feels like that.
Right.
Lars, thanks for taking the time to chat with us. I know Keelan, one of your local ambassadors, got out with Doug and Sky. So
Keelafari.
Yeah, yep. Probably a prime example of who this bike is intended for.
Yeah, for sure.
So you've probably been seeing clips of him railing turns throughout, but we are going to put together a whole riding edit of that time out on the Carbon Patrol, so check that out too. I'll link to that at the end of this video.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Yeah, we'll see you out on the trails.
Yeah, sounds good.